Okay, I think we're live. Hello, everybody. Great to see you all today. If you're here and joining us for the first time, do put a quick hello in the chat. We would love to get to know you and sort of say hi to everybody joining us for today's session. I'll also make sure to say hello to all of you. So if you didn't know, hello, my name is Megan. I am the director for the Startup Grind Osaka chapter. And I will be hosting today's session. So welcome. So today for the session, we are actually inviting Boris Jitsukata from the company Goodpatch. I'll let him do his introduction himself in a moment, but we're going to be talking about the art of venture building for global expansion in today's session. Hello, Christopher. Hello, Manira. Hello, Michelle. Really great to see you guys joining us today. So let me take my screen away. And yeah, let's begin. Are you ready, Boris?
Yeah, totally.
So thank you, firstly, so much for joining us today. I thought we could start today's session with, an introduction from you before we sort of dive into venture building. So do you want to share with us who you are, what you do?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and hello everybody in the virtual room. I'm talking to you from Chiba, which is in front of Tokyo at the coast, and I live out here since December again. I relocated with my family back to Japan after living 7 years in Berlin the last 7 years, and was building the office of Goodpatch over there in Europe. And before that, I was another 3 years in Japan already, and other countries I lived in were Finland and Switzerland and Germany, obviously, where I'm from. I'm from the south of Germany, Stuttgart area, where a lot of car makers are from, like Daimler and Porsche and Audi. And this is where I grew up, and I have a background in design and in business. And I get to do both things pretty much every day at my work at Goodpatch. I will explain about Goodpatch a little bit as well, but maybe on a personal note, I love going out to the mountains, do snowboarding a lot. Japan is also a great country for that. And went to business school, went to design school in Switzerland and in Japan. And just this duality of design and business is really what I have kind of incorporated in my career so far. Then I have to go on the slides. So then I just explain a little bit about Goodpatch. So I don't know if you know Goodpatch already. We are like one of Japan's leading design firms, specialized in the design of user experiences, mostly apps. That is what we have been doing the last now like 11 years. The company was founded by a Japanese person called Naofumi Tsuchiya, who went to Silicon Valley in 2011 and saw how great the apps are basically designed over there. And then at the same time, he realized how bad the Japanese apps were at that time, what the companies had been putting out. Even though the mobile internet was already really, really established in Japan, and you had it also on the foldable ketais, the way how the iPhone changed the landscape was dramatic. So apps were not websites anymore; they were like products, and this is what Goodpatch has been successfully doing the last 11 years, designing apps. A lot for big Japanese firms, but also startups. And then we did the same in Berlin over the last years. Also worked with a mix of automotive companies and a lot of different kind of startups. Beautiful thing as a design firm is you get to work with a lot of different industries. We are also stock listed since 2020, which is the first IPO of a design firm in Japan, and I think also elsewhere. this allowed us to open a conversation around like what is design and why is design making a company successful to a broader audience. And I think this is a really, really good thing. And the prove the power of design is like our mission, and this is something that we have now in the last year seen that everybody understands better what design is and what design can do for organizations, and a lot of companies are hiring more and more designers, and this is the trend that I see as well for the next years to continue. Yes, then this is, I think, just the introduction part, and now we could go over to the content part around venture building.
Absolutely. I will completely hand it over to you for this part, as we'll be talking about venture building, which has been gaining quite a bit of traction in Japan recently. So also for this session, we've decided to, both Boris and I have decided to actually go through and start with the basics of what venture building is, as we're aware our audience today might not know what it is or might not have as in-depth understanding of it. So I'm actually really excited for Boris really to give his introduction on how Goodpatch approaches venture building. Would you like to walk us through?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know exactly like how the audience tonight looks like, but maybe you can post in the chat if you are working in the field of venture building, what are your touch points with that topic? And that would be really interesting to know. But I definitely realized a difference when I come now from Europe. In December, I relocated, as I explained. And then I just realized that the topic is differently discussed over there in Berlin than it's being discussed here in Tokyo. And that made me just realize a bit more, oh, there's something going on here. And it's really interesting. And want to investigate today with you a bit like what this is about. Like, is there a big potential for venture building in its true form in the Japanese landscape? Is it just something that doesn't fit to the market here? And this is something I'm investigating a bit further today together with you. Then it just goes a bit like this. I'm gonna look into the evolution of venture building and why it matters Japanese companies today. And then I explain to you like our approach to venture building and what we have done with different companies in the last years. So it's like just the basic terms, like the two words, venture and building, right? So what are those words? I mean, venture is a different word for startup. You really venture out on a risky journey. You try something new, and then building is basically speaking for somewhat like making it repeatable, creating a setup that somewhat increases a bit the chances that these things don't fail, which is the real nature of venture. Most ventures fail, and that is something that we just try to mitigate some sort of with a repeatable process. And it's important that you basically understand what are the different things we always repeat when we build a new venture, and how can we make sense of that, and what are we all experiencing, those entrepreneurs who have been creating ventures, and do we need to fail really that much next time we do the same thing again? Maybe I just come maybe back to that slide a little bit later. I have here an overview which explains to you like where the origin comes from around venture building. So they were the very first originators from Silicon Valley. Most famously, maybe Idea Lab with Bill Cross and Y Combinator, which is still today like the most successful accelerator. And lots of companies came out of that systems. And here, kind of Bill Cross or Paul Graham, the serial entrepreneur, they wanted to create a platform for the different kind of startups that they were going to build in the next years. They knew that they're not going to just build one, they're going to build many. And how can we create a launch pad? And then it was like a first wave. Companies like Rainmaking definitely paved that way. BetaWorks from New York, Rocket Internet from Berlin, which kind of took that originator model from Silicon Valley and brought it somewhere else. And really believed in creating that shared infrastructure. And different companies approach it a bit differently, but for example, Rocket Internet emphasized that there should be a technology platform which all their companies portfolios could use and roll out services much faster than anybody was used to do that, really aggressively. And Rocket Internet had a big influence on German kind of startup scene. Has a mixed reputation, if you would say so. But it's nevertheless, you cannot deny that they really built a lot of stuff really fast and had a significant impact. And then what we saw after that is like the term startup studio was becoming very popular in Europe. So you could also say operational VCs. Those are very hands-on, sort of like more than other investors, and they would be having fun being engaged actually with the teams on the floor. They would hire probably kind of like people that previously might have joined a consulting firm like McKinsey, but now the entrepreneurship became really attractive kind of career path. So they hire these kind of like talents to become entrepreneurs in residence, and they maybe brought an idea, or the VC themselves kind of like gave them an idea to execute on. And this is a new form of VC that we haven't seen until that. Then the companies, the big companies, the corporates, they were becoming interested, right? They went to see companies in Berlin on their safaris and understood, okay, wow, they're doing something much faster than what we can do, and how can we do something like this here at our big corp? And then kind of the corporate venture builder ecosystem was created. Companies like Goodpatch, utilise, Bridgemaker, BCG Digital Ventures, they kind of like really established startup as a service, you can call it like that, and became really a proven method to innovate for big corporates. Okay, so this is what was going on kind of around the world, and the original inspiration. It's really like interesting. You could look at this comparison with a Hollywood studio, right? So if you're making a blockbuster, you need all this different infrastructure. And when you know that you're going to do more movies in the future, then like, let's build that infrastructure and build many blockbusters. And the same ideas here with the startup studios approach, which was paving the way for venture building. So then this slide here, I want to like just explain a bit more like why it's so important to really be aligned on what we are talking about when we talk about venture building, because there's many different methods a company can innovate, and these things are sometimes a bit similar at first, and you might be thinking you're talking about the same thing, but you're actually talking about something different. So what I mean by that is like, for example, separating what is corporate venture building and what is an accelerator or an incubator. And also separating it from like corporate venture capital, CVC, a method that is, for example, very popular in the Japanese market. And then also different from open innovation approaches, where you are having maybe contests or invite people from external to help you in the R&D process. Also, we then compared those different methods, and here you can see activities from 0 to 100, generating an idea, building a team, finding capital, build a product, lead the venture, and then core capabilities, which will be necessary. Shared services, methodology, and talent. And here I find it particularly interesting to compare it to corporate venture capital as a method. And corporate venture capital is something that where we're still trying to see how successful is that really, but these are long-term bets, and not the short-term result is to be expected. And companies have to have a long breath, like 5 to 10 years for sure, until any impact from those investments will be seen. And what happens if you are investing into startups as a corporate, and Goodpatch, my company, is also doing that. We have also Goodpatch Design Fund. So I am very much familiar with the challenges of that. Is like, you're not going to be able to control much in which direction a portfolio company is going, and you don't want that, right? You want to just invest. You're going to be a minority shareholder. You're going to trust that founder to do the right things, but you won't be able to control it. And to see effects, like synergy effects, or somewhat like working together more, is also a whole nother topic. So this won't be short term. This won't be like something that you can control. And it's a pretty, just the nature of venture capital is risky. So you as a corporate need to decide, can you take that risk? Do you have somewhat a place in your company where you can do that? If you're stock listed, it's very hard to do that because you have to write off these investments very soon if somewhat they're losing temporarily the valuation. And this is very hard to take if you have to do that several times. So what basically is my opinion, and what my team basically researched here was the corporate venture building is something that checks a lot of boxes, and you will develop that idea very closely aligned with maybe the overall company strategy. You will build that team yourself. You will be, also learning on the methods. You will be hiring those talents. You will be able to control these things, and you will go all the way from 0 to 100. And so this overview, I think I wanted to show you, but I also wanted to show you these metrics where you can see how you could compare those things in terms of ownership and control, and time and money investment. And where I would locate here corporate venture building is up there in the right upper corner, in a very high value, low risk quadrant, for those reasons that I just mentioned to you. And R&D, for example, is like also very internal, right? Like you own it, and we're probably very secret, but you still have to then have other parts of the company work together with those researchers to make it a good business for you. So this is what I see with the corporate venture building. You basically not only just want to create an innovative idea, but you also want to develop a great business with it, and you're doing it at the same time in very fast pace. You're validating quickly, right? So easy ramp up, ramp down. You can build those teams up and build them down or reassign to other topics. You have methodology. You bring in also external experts. You have output-driven approach with very fast release cycles, and it's not risky for the core business. Like you can call this something else, and people will not right away know that it's something that the big corporate developed. You won't risk your big home brand with such activities. So the approach to venture building, to make it more concrete, I brought some examples. So maybe NGK's big spark plug company. So making spark plugs. Every third car in the world has a spark plug from NGK, and it's an amazing company making products with ceramics. But then a company like that wants to find out, is spark plugs really our future in electric mobility? It's not that certain. So they have to do different things, and doing things which are not core business is essential, and you need to have a place for that. So they created a venture lab of NGK. They collaborated with us in Germany to, for example, validate a service around an app where you can share parking spaces from peer to peer. So really interesting approach, and within like not even 12 months, we built this app, brought it to a small audience in Berlin, tested it even in the field, in a neighborhood, and this is such a fast pace. And then a company can still decide, hey, do we want to do this more? Do we want to do this somewhat in a different setup? And but a lot of learning, and all of a sudden you have a spark plug company building an app service. And this is, I think, something that won't be the last app they build in the future. So it's really, really important to understand this as a learning journey too. Or with Mitsui, we have been forming a joint venture recently. Mitsui is a big player in the retail space. You probably, if you've been to Tokyo, have been in one of their retail spaces. so a big fintech company business. So here we formed choices and formed forces and built a joint venture. So where also the potential risks and upside is shared, and this is the next level also for collaboration between a venture builder and a corporate. So here many companies, also rainmaking, are exploring very interesting models. How can we actually go away from the traditional agency business and more into kind of a shared model? And this is then also really motivating for the team members. So from both companies, we joined some really cool talents, and they become the founders of this new venture. And you can check out those websites more. And just wanted to bring something tangible with me, right? But the approach that we would always bring is like and this is different, a bit different from different venture builders, but pretty similar at the same time. You always would start with a discovery. You want to understand what we actually supposed to build and validate that. Then you go into building mode, you hammer something out, and then you scale it. And you don't skip the steps, right? So this is super important. You won't be able to skip any of that. You have to do it step by step. And the goal in the discovery is really, you want to get to a validated prototype. You want to get to problem solution fit. And after you validate a problem solution fit, you're going to go and find product market fit. And then you're going to find business model fit. But again, here, there's no shortcuts. So super important, and this is where often the culture clash comes in, is like, if you're finding out after 3 months that this idea is not gonna be worth it, we have to make an active decision to close it. And we should not drag it on and keep it alive just that somebody looks good and maybe looks good in front of their manager. And we have to have a company environment where we can say, let's open the champagne bottles and celebrate that success, or finding out this idea is not validated as a good idea, and move on to the next topic and validate the next topic, right? So this is, I think, really interesting. Maybe we can talk more in the Q&A part about that. But you want to spend enough time in the problem space before you go to the solution space, and then you go into development. Just brought the design process here with me as well. I maybe skip here some part of that, but to make it more concrete, you have different activities, right? And most of you probably kind of know what's going on in those phases, but it really gets nitty gritty, and you need different kind of people in each phase of this project. And this is bringing me to maybe the kind of one of the philosophy that we push is not an MVP, but an MLP, minimum lovable product, a small amount of product, and an initial product that a small amount of users really love. So like your first 1,000 fans. And this is something where we just realized the term MVP has been so used heavily everywhere, also by our clients, that they probably forgot what it actually means in the original sense, how Eric Ries and Lean Startup was defining it, which is hypothesis testing. And it's not your first version of the product with an Android app and an iPhone app and all these features. No, we want to build something for your first 1,000 fans, and then they are spreading the word about your product, and then you can do all these other things like scaling up and so on. But you should know who are the first 1,000 people that you're building a service for. Yeah, so and then the team resources that will be needed in each phase are a bit different, but you can cluster them in management, design roles, growth roles, and development roles. And for a corporate who wants to do something new, they don't have all of these people available, right? So that's why they hire a company like Goodpatch or Rainmaking or BCG Digital Ventures to kind of get the right time of setup at the right time. That means like in the beginning, I probably need a lot of designers, and the designers are helping me to really understand the user and the market and build the first prototype. But then I need somebody who is pushing this thing forward, puts together a team in the form of a venture architect. So I probably also going to be able to hire such person with a strong prototype. The venture architect then really becomes a mini CEO, and then that person going to hire a great tech lead that puts together the engineers. And then once we have a product, we need to really invest heavy into growth and marketing and have those roles involved. But then we might not need so many designers anymore, right? So we're scaling down on that side. And then maybe as a final slide before we go into Q&A, we also looked at it a bit more philosophical, but we have here, when we talk about a venture, a whole ecosystem of things to consider. It's not just about the product itself or the technology, but we have to somewhat form a culture. We have the human as a user. We also have the planet that we have to consider with our impact. And then we have business topics and cultural, organizational topics, and data as a kind of foundation. So there's so many things that you need to tackle, and it's great to look at it as a map. I also have a Japanese slide of that here. But yeah, this is a lot to take in, but we can explore this topic more now in an interactive Q&A session. Thanks, Megan.
Absolutely. Thank you for really going in both at a high level and a detailed level onto what is venture building and how you approach it, and sort of how it can benefit companies, as well as, you know, how the structure sort of plays in. And I think from what we've seen in other startup grind sessions, like, we're very lightly following the journey of a startup, but with a different background and a different set of resources, which I think is really interesting when it comes to venture building. So I think that's answered some of the bigger questions for today's audience. We did run a little mini poll. It seems most people have no idea what venture building is, or know a little bit about it. So I think such a really deep introduction was really worthwhile for everybody. If you do have any questions that you do want to ask Boris, or just are very curious about, as there was quite a lot of information there, do pop it into the Q&A section. There's a tab on the top of chat that you can click and add your Q&A there, and I'll definitely try and bring them up to the stage and we can discuss them. Okay, so I actually have some questions for you as well, Boris. So based on everything that you do, from your company's perspective, why do you do venture building?
I think we started as a design firm doing mostly the user interface design, and then we expanded to like looking really at the bigger experience. And then we touched topics around strategy, and then companies ask us to develop as well. And then we just realized, even though we would be able to deliver a really great product, it's not enough. We also need to touch culture topics around the product team that actually gonna carry this thing forward inside the organization. And then we just, I don't know, like we started to do own products at Goodpatch. We built a prototyping tool called Prod, and also a digital whiteboard tool called Strap. We have also a HR hiring service, and Anywhere as a platform. We kind of started doing venture building naturally inside our own company. And then we realized, okay, actually next level is like teaching other companies, probably also like how can they work a bit more like Goodpatch, putting out these products in a very short time. And that just felt really, really like rewarding. And it was, you always need to look at it as from a corporate perspective, like we in our environments, I guess in rainmaking it's similar, like you work like this every day, but then you have clients in your workshops and they're like, oh, I'm too sad, tomorrow I'm gonna go back into my boring office and I'm not gonna use like post-its on a whiteboard and work like this anymore. And I'm like so surprised, because like I cannot imagine that this is not what work looks like. But then I think that is just a way to go, and I do believe that corporates can be the better startups. Actually, they have really amazing people, they're just often a little bit held back by the corporate culture, and it's just time to change that. And the new generation is definitely bring new energy in and tries to push things and try to move faster than they used to.
Absolutely. I do also agree. There's almost like a natural progression when you work sort of not even in this space, like in the innovation space particularly, but when you want to grow your company and you want to expand and develop new tools, you want to solve those problems that you're finding. Venture building really does feel like the next logical step for a lot of corporates. So, the fact that companies sort of fill that space to help these corporates navigate some of those hurdles, I think is like a really great opportunity for corporates, and also for founders who can sort of learn from this. So yeah, the innovation space has been growing and evolving quite a lot in Japan over the last few years. I think both you and I have really experienced that. Do you have any thoughts and views on how innovation has changed recently, and sort of what trends you're starting to notice around this space?
In particular in Japan, you mean?
Yes, in particularly in Japan.
So when I first lived in Tokyo, that was in 2011, and that was really the first wave of like startup culture in Tokyo, and companies like Gonosi or Frill or these companies just became really big, and that was the first noticeable like amounts of venture capital going into these tech startups and so on. And then there was a time where there was so much capital in the Japanese VC market, and more than like founders who dared to do and build a startup. And those few founders that did, they were doing like really great stuff, and many of them actually had no problem to find capital, right? So that was not the issue at all. And then a lot of corporates also went into venture capital. So there was somewhat a misbalance between capital and founders who could actually build these things. So then looking at where are those talented people, they are probably working in bigger corporates. So enabling them to have more ownership, authority, responsibility, and are not held back by like hierarchies. That is something I really love to see, and empowering people to actually go ahead and build stuff, right? And they don't need to quit their corporate job if it gives them security. But a lot of the most talented people in Tokyo now, they actually don't work in a company anymore. They are all like now on a freelance base, or like they are going independent. With Goodpatch Anywhere, we, for example, have now a pool of contractors of over 500 that are people, designers mostly, that live somewhere else, not in Tokyo anymore. So these things are rapidly changing. So I think also here, corporates can build really good stuff, and they don't need to hire those people fixed on jobs anymore, but they can approach it probably more project based, and they need to open up and build an ecosystem and network around the company, and and to get to work with real experts in their field, right? I think there's a lot of changing around like what kind of people are looking for in a workplace, and what kind of degree of freedom and responsibility they're looking for. And that is not just limited to Japan, but it is reaching Japan definitely, and it's more kind of felt here because there's less good people available, because the young workforce is it's getting smaller, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And I don't know if you've seen it recently as well, but there's been talk about how the younger workforce in Japan is also starting to explore innovation more. So, like you mentioned, you have all these freelancers. We also are starting to see an uptick in startups being built by people fresh out of university, or even sometimes connected to their university, with some of the research labs, which I think is really inspiring. And it also creates this very interesting pool of talent for those corporates who are venturing over into venture building.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've got this huge mix of innovation companies, and we've got all these different corporates and venture builders that are sort of stepping and supporting there. Is there any particular reason why you work with large corporates when building new products or new ventures?
Like, I think what's really nice is that we were able to work always with a portfolio of startup companies and with a portfolio of big companies. But of course, a startup needs something very different, and there you have different kind of energy going on. You have work directly with the founders and have quick output. What particular this venture building offering is something that the startup don't need, right? The corporate needs it because the startup is doing that already. So in that regard, that offering is more targeted at corporates, right?
So what also, because you've worked a lot on the design side, and you've grown quite organically through into this like venture building space. Do you think there was a point in time where you could have pivoted and maybe become more of startup focused or across the range, or of a similar sort? Was there a particular reason why you felt that corporates were the gap to sort of go forward with?
No, I think more like it's interesting what was going on in the design industry the last years. Is that companies needed to figure out their path of staying independent. I'm talking about design agencies in particular, right? And you have very few companies like us who build their own products next to their agency services, and a lot of companies had to somewhat sell their business. So they sold to consulting firms and advertising holdings. Like so great companies. Even an IDEO has been selling to Hagohodo, right? Like 50 or more %. So that was like the trend of acquisitions in the design industry the last years. And what I just see is that consulting firms, they were just basically also looking for what's next, and everybody realized it's all about the capability of building digital products, right? So that's why they were acquiring a lot of design firms. And for the design firm, it has been very interesting from my perspective. A few years ago, we were not invited as a designers to be part of like strategy discussions, right? We would be invited much later. But now design is such an important kind of role in the company. And what I just see is that the consulting and just making a good concept or telling theoretically like what the company should do was not enough. So companies would be presented a really nice like solution, but then they were still asking like, okay, how do we now get this developed, right? How do we bring this in the App Store? And then they would be asking Goodpatch for that. So what was important for us, kind of, we had to work in the other direction, building capabilities as a consulting firm, and while the consulting firms were building design capabilities. But we were venture building already our own products inside. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring that process also to the corporates and do that hands-on and not theoretically. And so interesting how companies are changing, and Goodpatch is in the process of changing. And with the IPO, a lot of things are changing today. The industry is completely changing. Companies are hiring a lot of designers also in-house. So this is really, really interesting shift.
Yeah, I completely agree. And some of those large companies that you work with, some of them may already have sort of some form of innovation efforts ongoing. It could be maybe their own R&D, or they've got a specific department that's engaging with domestic or foreign startups through some sort of collaboration. In your opinion, do you think that venture building by large corporates are directly complementary or contradictory to these innovation efforts?
it's complementary. So they have basically, they would still need the R&D department, and they would still need probably corporate venture capital, or doing M&As and all the other methods that I also showed on the chart. But you have to look at corporate venture capital as a portfolio approach. So you need definitely like many, I don't know, 20, 30 at least companies, so that you hedge the bets, right? And then if you are somewhat in a audited control environment where these kind of failures are actually not expected or wanted, it becomes really hard to do proper venture capital. And this is the method that has been so pushed the last years in Japan. And then maybe that is now kind of also with this recent kind of reset in the tech industry, maybe becoming a bit obvious that this is a very risky business to be in, right? So what I do believe is, like, instead of maybe investing into 20 startups per year, you just have to have a proper process in place, that you do a few own ventures that you enable, and then you are mixing your teams from your like core staff with an external. You maybe try out different approaches, and then you are understanding what venture building process fits to your company, and then you are trying to learn over the years how to continuously build different kind of like startups from within. And that is something that is going to be more rewarding, because there's so much learning. You can really also give new career paths to your employees. So things stay more in-house, and in somewhat like, you're not trying to build a ship, you build a shipyard for many future ships to be rolled out, right? So I think it's more sustainable, and especially compared to R&D, much faster.
Absolutely, I really like that analogy. It's a very good way to explain it, I think. So also, like, from your experience and sort of what you were talking about with these indicators that are happening in our current market, with the tech market, do you think there are any signals or indicators that you can look out for to indicate that a company is perhaps ready to embark on a venture building journey, or building their own shipyard, as you put it?
Yeah, so like in the example with the NGK, the spark plug company, when your core business is gonna be disrupted because electric cars don't have spark plugs anymore, then you need to do something, and you need to find solutions in different areas than from your core business today. You need to find your next core business, and then you need to do things that you haven't done before, and then that gets really, really like frightening for the management. And then many people will laugh at that, like we are a spark plug company. Why are we building apps? Like, this has nothing to do with our core business, and that's exactly the point, right? So, but then you will have to fight many internal hurdles and barriers, because people won't get it. Few people will, and these are the kind of like allies that you need to rally up. Yeah.
Would you say those are sort of internal, or would you say those are external allies?
So internal allies you also need. Yeah, but yeah, another example from Germany, maybe Porsche. Porsche has also been doing a lot of stuff in that field. They call it like Porsche Digital, and they strictly said, like, in this company arm, we're gonna do everything that is not core business, and core business is selling sports cars. But now they went into CVC and CVB, and investing in all kind of startups that have nothing to do with the core business. But even a great company like Porsche is doing that, right? So any other company should also be doing that. Even Porsche, with such a great core product, is trying to build apps on the side. They don't need to do that. But at least it helps their company culture as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Would you say that there are any common mistakes that large corporates like this make when they seek to build new ventures? And how would you sort of advise them to look out for those mistakes?
Yeah, I think, you probably shared those experiences with me, but one part is just really, really hard to wrap your head around. Is like, it's good if we fail fast and early. You have to have that mindset very, very clearly communicated, not only to the direct team that you're working with, but to their bosses and bosses' bosses. Because even though that team that you directly work with is totally aware of that, they will have troubles explaining that to the top management. So it has to go that way, that top management understands we need corporate venture building, and then they are asking their teams to implement that. If
Yeah,
the top
absolutely.
has not been involved in the conversations that you had, it all goes in vain. Because what will happen is, after a validation period, we will have to look each other in the eyes and say, we found out it's not going to work, right? This idea is a stupid idea. We tried to validate it, and it's good that we find that out now. So let's stop that initiative and look at the other ideas that we have in our portfolio
Yeah,
to validate
absolutely.
the prototype with. But then they are being asked, okay, so what did you do the last 3 months? And then they say, like, we validated that this is not an idea worth following. Also, you're like, what is this? Like, stop wasting money of the company. Yeah, but this is actually saving you money, because if you now would keep it alive for another year, you would spend many more millions on that. And so this is just the difficult part, right? How much are people actually aware of what you're trying to do here, and how do we look at these failures, which are actual successes?
Yeah, we did talk a little bit about that before this session, actually, on, we see this trend in Japan where they kind of get this blanket label of being risk adverse, which when you look at the table, when you understand venture building, it is a lower risk path that you can take compared to some of the other spaces. However, the fact that you're creating a new venture to somebody who's a little bit up on the hierarchical chain, who may not have all the information or not the full understanding, this whole, this has not been validated, or this has been proven is not going to work, that pulling the plug can sometimes seem like quite a daunting step for some companies to take.
I think it's important that you look at it as an innovation expense. So as a company, you should agree we need to invest a certain amount of our maybe profit into innovation. Maybe let's say 10% of our profit we invest every year into innovation, and then you have different innovation methods to choose from, right? But then that money you could either put in R&D, or you could put it in CVC, or put it in CVB, and then you need to look at it also like that. So you're not how say it shouldn't be a problem that money is somewhat like lost in some areas, because you're gonna do it in a portfolio approach, and you're gonna build one winner from that eventually. But you just need to look at it as a portfolio, and as we now discussed, there's ways of speeding up that process, and there's more lengthy, costly ways of doing it. But
Yeah,
a bit biased, of course, but like this is how bring me counter arguments, right? That other approaches are better. What is interesting is, like, it's really around this terminology. So talked a lot of to companies in the last months in Tokyo again, and just realize like the term venture building is some term, like it's simply again a term that has not been used a lot in like Japanese texts. And then what happens is that you have a lot of conversations around like what is a company already doing, and they're doing a lot of new business development already, and they always develop new innovative business. Like it's a very classic approach of Japanese companies to have a big variety of businesses and new businesses being created. We call it kind of new business development kind of like department. But then I do believe that companies might be missing out on something here, because the term venture building and the method that exactly is meant by that is not being kind of used in the active vocabulary. That is just a hypothesis that I have right now that I want to validate. But I don't know what you think about that. Yeah.
What an entrepreneurial mindset. Have a hypothesis, got your assumption, exactly. Time to validate. Absolutely. We do have a couple of questions from the audience, and they are actually tipping more towards the startup side. I was hoping you could perhaps try and answer some of these. So Joey from, actually our Startup Growing Tokyo chapter, I believe, actually wants to know, like, do you scout for startups? Do you work together with startups? And, is there a potential for sort of collaboration with startups through some of the venture building work that you do?
So we work with startups in different ways. One would be with our kind of core business around agency services, where we build a UX UI and help also startups in the early phase with that. And then there would be the other topic which I mentioned is our CVC arm. We do Goodpatch Design Fund investments, where we invest into startup companies. We have done, I think, 5 or so in the last 2 years. And then this is the kind of collaboration we have going on there. So I think what we're looking for with the design fund is like companies where we definitely see a great tech team, but then they're not having yet big design capabilities. So if we can complement each other here, then it would be fantastic. And we would not just bring venture capital, but also our know-how around design. And then we can maybe help to also shape that early version of a product. But our investments are not super early stage, so we would do that later if kind of the path to IPO is already kind of also visible and there's other investments around previously. So probably around Series A or Series B, we would be able to join in.
Absolutely, thank you. And we have Roger, who I believe is busy working on his own startup at the moment, who's actually just curious if you have any advice for someone who's starting out, perhaps with a mini venture or something. Do you know of any really interesting resources that he could maybe get a hold of, even as a solopreneur?
I mean, so many things I could think of. And that, just him asking that is already right approach. I think like there can be so many distractions, I would say, as a entrepreneur, solo entrepreneur. So what you should be doing is probably talk to your customers and focus on building a product. And too much input can also kind of be actually counterproductive. So kind of focus at your challenge at hand and try to build a good, maybe small group of people that you can turn to. So like maybe other entrepreneurs, other founders that you can discuss all the difficult things with.
Yeah, I'll actually agree with a lot of that. There are a lot of resources out there, and there's also a lot of communities. I don't know, Roger, if you're coming from Japan or if you're coming from overseas to join our session today. At the beginning, Boris actually walked us through what venture building was, and he had a slide where he sort of outlined the stages of a venture. And I think you can also learn from that as well when you're building your own startup. Like, you have your rough idea, and you have to work towards sort of finding the problem solution fit. So validating, talk to your customers. Is it actually something that they want as a product? Is your idea correct? Are your assumptions correct? And then you would basically start working from product solution fit up to product market fit. Get your product out onto the market, get some customers, get them to keep coming back, repeat customers, presuming you've got a product that they come back to constantly.
Right.
Then you start basically building up to your, was it business model fit is the last one, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's what I have in my slide. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think it's like it's because these things are every person has like certain a sweet spot, something that you are really good at, and then, for example, maybe a designer, that person would think about the design of their startup idea so much, and would put so much time in that. And then the person from business school would probably write a business plan, a really elaborate one. And then and a techie that would code all night long. But then it's then not easy to go out of your comfort zone and actually talk to potential customers. Maybe if you're introvert, you don't like to sell stuff, and then you skip that step and you read a code a lot. But then a year goes by and you felt you did so much, but then actually it will never translate into a business. So that process can also be sped up. Like that is what we're teaching the corporates, but this is something that I personally also just try to whoever needs that advice at which moment, especially students, I talk to with this message a lot. I tell them, like, please read those books like Eric Ries's and so on, and Steve Blank. These are the Bibles. So validate your ideas without wasting your time on building something nobody cares about.
Absolutely. So I have one more question for you, and before we wrap up tonight. So for our audience today and the people who will be watching the recording of this later, we have a collection of startup founders, aspiring entrepreneurs, corporates, various members of the innovation ecosystem, not just in Osaka, clearly. But if any of them are interested in starting on sort of a venture building journey, what advice do you have for them right now?
I think it's not anymore so black and white about joining a big company or a startup. You actually find environments which are quite similar in different places, and it can be really refreshing. And you should maybe you should look at this like that. So first of all, if you're super young and fresh out of school, you don't need to start your own startup. It can be super intimidating, and it's maybe not the right thing for everybody. If you feel like this is the right thing and you have a great idea that you want to really work on, do that. I'm not going to stop you from doing that. But then what basically you can understand is you will be, with your skills, you will be so qualified to find a job very easily. You can always fall back on a corporate job. But why don't you try out if you have an idea? And if not, it's not that bad. You will find very startup-y environment in big corporate companies as well. And then you might learn a lot, which then enables you to do even better stuff on your own later on. So you you will be still able to found a company when you're 40, when you have done a lot of learning in your first career. And this is, I think, don't think so much in black or white, and don't feel pressure to start a startup when you're 20.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us, for walking us through the art of venture building, and for answering all the questions.
Yes, nice moderation, nice questions. I really enjoyed that.
I'm glad to hear that. We'll actually be wrapping up the session today. When this session closes, we'll be opening up the lounge. So if you do want to join and ask us a couple more questions one-on-one, do stick around, join us in the lounge. We'll be in there very, very soon. Hopefully we can see you there. If not, we hope you have a really good evening and look forward to seeing you in future events.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.